Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Kyle back with another deep diving video here for the fantasy headliners. If you love the deep diving statistical videos that we do, projections, breakdowns, this video is going to be the one for you. Hit the like button and subscribe if you are new here, because you are not going to want to miss what I have got here for you to detail a couple of guys that I believe are on the cusp of breaking out and becoming big-time players for fantasy football owners. So hit that like button for me. And if you haven't done so yet, I don't know why you're so late to this, but you have got to get your fantasy headliners draft guide for here in 2022. This thing is jam-packed with over 300 player profiles, exclusive content that you can't find anywhere else, like my dynamic running back rating. This thing updates periodically throughout the offseason because it is digital. So all of those updates get pushed over to you right away so you can get them. All the knowledge that you need right at your fingertips. And if you're old school and you like to print off your draft guides, you can do so. There is a PDF that you can download to print that off as well. This thing is absolutely incredible. So you need to make sure that you head over to the fantasyheadliners.com and get yours today. This is what I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen. Two players I'm going to be detailing in depth for you, a big time breakdown. Then at the end of the video, I am going to be going through some training camp updates, what that means for specific players and what it may mean for you and how we should be looking at their current value. But hey, if we can get let's say 1,500 likes on this video, I am going to give away a free draft guide to somebody that is commenting down below with a question that I'm going to ask a little bit later on in this video. So hit that like button, 1,500 likes. I'm going to pick one random commenter to give one of these draft guides away to. But I think this is enough of it. We got to hop into it and start talking about my number one breakout in this video. It's going to be a guy that we have loved all offseason long, Gabe Davis, or Gabriel Davis, depending on if you want to be fancy or not. Gabriel Davis from the Buffalo Bills. In 2021, he finished the season as the wide receiver 53 with 108.4 half PPR fantasy points. Now, there seems to be a lot of people on either side of Gabe Davis. It seems like either you really like Gabe Davis or you really don't. And there are some specific examples as to why people don't like Gabe Davis, and we're going to be covering all those things in this video. But for right now, I want to talk about why I believe Gabe Davis is on the cusp of a breakout. Well, let's just keep in mind that Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders are now gone, and both of those guys combined for 184 targets last season. So that is now 184 vacated targets that are going to be available for Gabe Davis to start digging into a little bit. And the one thing that we know about this Bills offense, that it is a pass-happy offense. I mean, over the course of the last 3 years, we've seen the Bills' passing attempts climb each of the past 3 seasons. Back in 2019, they threw the ball 513 times. In 2020, it went to 596. In 2021, it went all the way up to 655, fifth in the NFL for passing attempts. So this is an offense that goes. And it's also an offense that doesn't run the ball often. It's not a run-heavy team. They're going to do just enough to try and keep teams off balance, but they put their foot on the pedal, they put the pedal to the floor, and they don't stop. They go at it the entire game. Plus the AFC, it's a lot better this year than it has been in years past. This is going to be a conference that no matter what week you're playing, you're going to have to score fantasy points. One thing about Gabriel Davis, too, is a lot of people are, I've seen people say, well, just because Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders are gone doesn't mean Gabe Davis is going to get a whole lot of targets. But you have to keep in mind that Gabe Davis had a decent amount of targets last year anyway. He had 63 targets in 2021, and that was fourth best on the team, but it was only 8 less than Knox and 9 less than Sanders. So he wasn't really that far behind these two guys either. So it's not like he was a distant afterthought in this offense. You had you had Stephon Diggs clearly at the very top of the offense, right? He got the most. And then you had Cole Beasley, number 2. So actually, technically, I'm sorry, I said 4th. Gabe Davis was 5th on the team in targets. So there is going to be an opportunity for him to get more targets. And we're going to break all of that down in depth here in just a minute. I'm going to go deep into the numbers with you. But a few stats that I want to point out about Gabe Davis first to kind of help solidify the fact that this is a guy that could be looking to take a step forward. 14.54 average depth of target last season. That was 9th in the NFL. He had 15.69 yards per receptions. That was also 9th. Both of those numbers among qualifying wide receivers. And then he averaged 3.10 fantasy points per touch. First overall among wide receivers last season. When Davis touched the ball, he was putting up fantasy points. So yes, the volume wasn't as high as we would have liked last season, but he was being pretty darn good with the numbers that he was being given. Now, on targets that went 20 or more yards down the field, those deep passes, an area which we really believe we think that Gabe Davis is going to excel in, had decent numbers, not the best, but decent numbers. 25.4% of his target rate was targets that were 20 or more yards down the field, 18th among wide receivers. And then he did average 35.4 yards per reception, 27th among wide receivers on those targets of 20 or more yards down the field. He scored 4 touchdowns on those, tied for 4th in the league. There was a few players tied with 4 total touchdowns. So we know that he was really taking those big time targets, putting them in the end zone and using those to put up fantasy points. Now let's dive into the numbers, because I'm going to go ahead and say, let's just jot back here for just a second, because I mentioned a moment ago that last season, the Bills had 655 passing attempts, 5th in the NFL. So let's go ahead and break down potential target share for some of the big known names as of right now on the team. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and project 650 passing attempts. 5 less passing attempts than what they had last season, which will give us room to grow. All right, so that's going to give us room to grow. I'm going to try to stay a little bit on the... I'm staying self-conscious about the numbers. I don't want to put some crazy numbers up and be like, Kyle, that's not realistic. I'm trying to be realistic with everything. So let's say 5 less passing attempts last season. Let's say Diggs gets a little bit of a boost and he goes up to 170 targets this season. Let's say Dawson Knox gets a little bit of a boost. He goes up to 80 targets this season. Let's say the running backs total, all the running backs combined, they also get a little bit of a boost. And I want to do that because of James Cook. Singletary and Zach Moss last year had about 80 targets in the passing game, about 80 targets. So I'm going to give them 20 more targets for the running backs, just so you know that I am factoring in that James Cook is probably going to be a guy that is going to help in the passing game. So let's bump them up, all the running backs combined, to 100 targets. Jamison Crowder, he's coming in. He's going to fill the Cole Beasley role. I don't necessarily believe that this dude is going to go to the 113 targets right away that Cole Beasley saw last year. But let's say 80 targets. I think 80 targets is a good round number for Jamison Crowder in the slot, knowing that he's coming in as a free agent. And then Isaiah McKenzie, a guy that showed up at times last season. We're going to give him a little of a boost too, and we're going to move him up to 40 targets. So realistically, everybody that's coming back this year, McKenzie, Diggs, Knox, and the running backs, I'm boosting their targets. I'm giving them more targets this year than they got last year to account for all the targets that have been vacated. Just so you know that I am trying to be realistic here and not saying all those targets are going to go to Gabe Davis. But what do I think could go to Gabe Davis? Do we not think that Gabe Davis could see somewhat of a double in targets? Because he could easily go to 120 targets. Because I'm saying 650 passing attempts total for the Bills team. I'm giving all these targets to the guys up above, and I'm doubling almost Gabe Davis's targets, giving him 120 targets on the season. And you know what? If you don't love the numbers that you see above, There's still 60 targets that are left over that could be miscellaneous targets going to just random guys on the Bills. You know, some guy that could get 1 or 2 targets here or there. If you want to give a little bit more targets to Diggs, you could. If you wanted to give more to Knox, you could. If you wanted to give more to the running backs, you could. Hell, you could say, hey, I think Jamison Crowder is going to get 100 targets this season. You could give him 20 more targets, and you're still going to have 40 targets left over that you could realistically adjust around a little bit. So just so you see the numbers laid out there for you, it is 100% conceivable that we could see Gabe Davis go up to 120 targets this season. So what if he goes up to 120 targets? What are some of the numbers that we could see him put together? Well, if we say 120 targets, the last couple of years, he's been right around 55, 56% in the catch rate area. I'm going to give him a boost up to 60. I'm not going crazy with it, but I do believe your third year in the league, it's going to offer him an opportunity to grow in that area a little bit. So I'm going to say a 60% catch rate, which would put him at 72 receptions for the 2022 season. Now, his yards per reception, he's been a little bit higher than 15 to begin his career. But I'm going to go ahead and play it on the low side, and I'm going to say that this is a guy that will be the deep threat on this team. We're going to stick him around 15 yards per reception, which was honestly less yards per reception than Emmanuel Sanders had last year. So 15 yards per reception. So if he has 122 targets, or if he has 120 targets, he catches 60% of those. That's going to give him 72 receptions at 15 yards per reception. Should put him right around 1,080 receiving yards. And again, I'm trying to be realistic with these numbers and play to him on the low end. Well, the last 2 seasons, Gabe Davis has averaged a touchdown every 5.5 receptions, which would mean if he were to continue that trend, he would score 12 touchdowns in 2022. I'm going to back off that, though, and I'm going to say 10 touchdowns. Okay, so again, I'm going to try and stay a little bit lower, but I believe the jump from 5 or 6 touchdowns up to 10 is realistic. I think that's realistic, given his deep playability and what we've seen him to do, and the likely increase in targets. Going to 10 touchdowns, I think, is absolutely doable. So, if we give him these numbers, 72 receptions, 1,080 receiving yards, and 10 touchdowns in a half PPR league, you're going to get 36 points from his receptions. You're going to get 108 points from his receiving yards. And you're going to get 60 points from his touchdowns. This would leave you in a half PPR league. Gabe Davis would potentially score 204 half PPR points. If we take those 204 points and we put them in the 2021 season, Gabe Davis would have finished as the wide receiver 13 overall. So again, all of those numbers that I just broke down for you, do we not believe that it is somewhat conceivable that I played it on the lower end of some of these numbers, that I didn't go too crazy, that I didn't say, hey, this guy is all of a sudden going to become like a wide receiver 1? No, I did not. I even tried to play it a little bit on the lower end and let you see that there is room for every target in this offense to grow, for Davis to still double his numbers, and for there still to be a decent amount of targets left over that if you want to assign to other people, you're more than welcome to do that. So to say wide receiver 15, if you were to put up those type of numbers, that's not bad. And that is a breakout in my opinion. So all that information right there does absolutely show you that the chance for Gabe Davis to reach into that high wide receiver 2 area is absolutely there. Now, it's going to be predicated on those touchdowns. If he doesn't score 10 touchdowns and those back off a little bit, we're looking at more of along the lines of a low wide receiver 2. But even then, if you took away a couple of touchdowns you're still looking at putting him right at the end of those wide receiver 2s, which to me would be a great jump for him this season and one that I would want on my roster. Another guy that's getting a little bit of steam right now in training camp that a lot of people like, but last season to begin the year he found himself in the doghouse, and that's Brandon Ayuk from the San Francisco 49ers. He's going to get himself a new quarterback this year, and the big man Trey Lance. If you don't believe in Trey Lance, you probably don't believe in Brandon Ayuk, but I believe in Trey Lance more than probably a lot of people that are watching this video right now. In 2021, even after a miserable start to the season, one in which that saw Brandon Ayuk do basically nothing for the first 8 weeks of the season, he still finished as the wide receiver 36 with 142.3 half PPR fantasy points. So I wanted to lock in on weeks 9 through 18 because 9 through 18 for me were the most important parts of the 49ers season last year in terms of trying to predict what we could see coming up soon. So week 9 is really when Brandon Ayuk got himself reinvigorated and reintegrated into the 49ers offense. From week 9 through 18 last season, among all wide receivers, he was 21st with 61 targets. He tied for 16th with 45 or 43 receptions. He was tied for 7th in receiving yards with 675 receiving yards over the course of that time. He was 11th in yards per reception with 15.7, and he was 3rd with 6.95 yards after the catch per reception. He scored 112.6 half PPR fantasy points during that stretch, making him the wide receiver 13 from weeks 9 to 18. So again, that stretch to begin the season was absolutely horrible for Brandon Ayuk. Dude didn't do anything, was in the doghouse, and Kyle Shanahan was not giving him any love in the offense, taking him off the field often. In week 8, he kind of had a little bit of a bounce back. We could see some of that start to begin, and then week 9 is really when he got himself looking like he did the year prior. Now, here's the big thing. And one of the arguments that I see for skipping on Debo, skipping on Kittle, skipping on Brandon Ayuk, and it's the fact that, can these guys really all survive together on the field at the same time? Well, why not? Because this stretch right here, week 9 through 18, there was only one game in which the 49ers did not have Ayuk, Samuel, and Kittle all on the field together. That was week 13 when Debo missed. So all three of these guys were on the field together every game but one from weeks 9 through 18. And during that time, Debo Samuel was the wide receiver 2, Brandon Ayuk was the wide receiver 13, and George Kittle was the tight end 2. Now, Debo Samuel was really propped up by those rushing touchdowns during that time, but we know now the new contract that he has signed has incentives for him to help him if they continue to use him in that role. So guess what? They are, ladies and gentlemen. I've been trying to tell you that maybe he doesn't run the football as much, but they are still going to utilize him as a weapon like they have been doing. So yes, I fully believe that these are three guys that can all survive together. And Trey Lance has the big time arm, the IQ, and everything that is needed to really help push all these guys together. In fact, on weeks 9 through 18 last year, Brandon Ayuk, Debo Samuel, and George Kittle. Here's the numbers that they all put up together. These are some pretty decent numbers for that time frame in which all three guys were together on the field at the same time with Jimmy Garoppolo. Do you really believe that if Trey Lance comes in and is the starting quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, that he does less than what Jimmy Garoppolo did? Do you really believe that? It is hard for me, knowing the draft capital that they spent on Trey Lance, knowing the upside that we have seen from him, knowing the tools that he has, knowing everything going on with this guy and how good he is, that he's not better than what Jimmy Garoppolo was. It's hard. It is hard for me to see that. So, with all that being said, with all of that convincing that all three of these guys can perform together on the field at the same time, let's take a look at some potential projections for Brandon Ayuk. Week 9 through 18 last season, 10 games. Per game stats, 6.1 targets, 4.3 receptions, 67.5 receiving yards, and 0.4 touchdowns per game. Over 10 games. That's the per game numbers for Brandon Ayuk. So if you were to take those and try to spread them out over the course of a 17-game season, you're looking at 103 targets, 73 receptions, 1,147 receiving yards, and 7 touchdowns. Nothing about those numbers seem crazy, right? He would have his first 1,000 receiving yard season. He definitely can do it in this offense. No reason why. The targets aren't insane. The receptions aren't insane. And the touchdowns aren't insane either. So those to me are pretty decent projections in my mind. So if we were to take those and add some fantasy points to them, okay, in a half PPR league, 73 receptions would come out to 36.5 fantasy points. 1,147 receiving yards would come out to 114.7 fantasy points, and 7 touchdowns would come out to 42 fantasy points. Add those all together, and you come up with 193.2 half PPR fantasy points, which in the 2021 season, drumroll please, would have left him as the wide receiver 19. This is a guy that you're drafting right now, kind of as like your wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 in some leagues. And if you're getting a guy that has potential wide receiver 19 upside that could finish as a mid to low wide receiver 2, that's a smash for me all day, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely smashing Brandon Ayuk. Love the potential for him. But I also like Debo and I also like George Kittle. And why? Because I believe in Trey Lance. If you don't believe in Trey Lance, you're probably rolling your eyes right now. If you do, you're sitting there nodding going, yeah, baby. I absolutely like this. I like this. Whew. Let's go. Let's get it. I like this opportunity right here. Training camp notes. Let's talk about a few players real quick now that we've broke down a couple of potential breakouts for you. Training camp notes. Ryan Jensen, done for the season, unfortunately, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A lot of talk right now about Leonard Fournette. And what does that mean for this offense, knowing that they lost both of their guards from last season and their center now from last season as well? Now, in a previous video, I did make a comment in the comments, but I had mentioned something about they got one of their guards back. That was incorrect. I was thinking about Jensen and just was overtired and just accidentally commented with that. No, so they lost both of their guards from last season, and now they have lost their starting center as well. Ryan Jensen was thought to be done. He decided to come back when Tom Brady came back, but now that offensive line has seen a lot of turnover. However, they have brought in some guys that could be pretty decent replacements, and it's not like they already didn't have some really good offensive tackles as well. So for me, am I really going to jump off the Leonard Fournette bandwagon? No, not right now. Not right now. I'm still going to be drafting him because his ADP is way too good. This is a guy that you're getting at the end of the second, early third round based on some ADP. And now because of the offensive line turnover, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people started to say, I'm going to skip on it, especially with all the noise that came through regarding him being out of shape and stuff. It's helping hold his ADP. So honestly, that's just a help for you. So for me, I'm not done. I'm not done with Leonard Fournette. As far as the passing game goes, I mean, Tom Brady is a master of getting the ball out quickly. So if they have to retailer that offense a little bit to make sure that they're getting the ball out a little bit quickly, maybe that hurts down the field a little bit for Mike Evans, but he'll still see plenty of volume. So for me, I'm not willing to bail on any of these guys right now, knowing that what we have seen so far with the offensive line has brought a little bit of restructuring, because I'm still willing to go forward with it. Out of Pittsburgh, this is an interesting one. Chase Claypool going to the slot. He's been getting a lot of work out of the slot apparently in training camp. And to begin the season, I believed that Pickens would be the guy in the slot. Claypool would still be the guy to begin the season, at least on the outside. And that changes things dramatically for me, because if you're a Deontay Johnson fan out there, one of your main arguments is, he's the best route runner in the league. It doesn't matter where he gets the targets, he gets himself open. However, Deontay Johnson has made his living by getting open in those intermediate routes with Ben Roethlisberger. So 10 or so yards off the line of scrimmage is where he does his damage. But he's never really had another guy that's kind of lived in that area the last couple of years. Yeah, you've had Juju, but a couple of years ago, Juju wasn't really that guy working out of the slot there. So if you move Chase Claypool to the slot, you're going to take away kind of that deep threat that we saw Chase Claypool do, where he was a guy streaking down the field. He was running those routes on the outside. Now we're going to see a big competition over the middle of the field in those intermediate routes for Deontay Johnson. If Chase Claypool is sitting in there, Pat Freiermuth is sitting in there, and you also have to keep in mind that you've got Najee Harris getting a lot of those short targets. Now we take a look at Deontay Johnson and think to ourselves, hey, this is a guy that really didn't have a whole lot of competition for those targets recently, and now is going to have 3 other guys vying for those targets this season. This only adds to the fact that because of the quarterback situation, for me, I'm skipping on Deontay Johnson at his current ADP And I am going to be taking a look at potentially Chase Claypool a little bit later on in the draft. Down in Dallas, James Washington unfortunately broke his foot and is out 6 to 10 weeks. So what does this mean? Keep an eye on Jalen Tolbert. I believe we brought up Jalen Tolbert's name in a video a little while back. And we also, Chris Chouse has brought up his name as well. Has brought up his name as well over on Headliner U. So Jalen Tolbert is a name that we are familiar with here at the Fantasy Headliners, and we want to make sure that you're also familiar with it as well. Now, Jalen Tolbert, for me, is not a guy that might have huge implications on the season, but it could be depending on Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup is going to kind of be the X factor here. He's working his way back. So far in training camp, people have said, yes, he looks good. He looks ready to go. He's getting back to that. So Jalen Tolbert, if he ends up working out of the slot, we've got CD and Michael Gallup on the outside. Could end up being a guy that maybe on a weekly basis helps out in PPR leagues. But if Michael Gallup ends up being out, then that is good for Jalen Tolbert. I don't want you to get uber excited, though, because you still have Tony Pollard that we like, and you still have Dax Binky and Dalton Schultz. So keep his mind on your radar. Make sure that you have that name kind of penciled in there in your queue just to kind of keep an eye over the next couple of weeks. Maybe he's a late draft guy that you pick up that could end up potentially playing out if for some reason Michael Gallup isn't ready to go and Tolbert gets a few looks to begin the year. But there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, leave me a comment down below. Where do you think Brandon Ayuk and Gabe Davis end up finishing this season? If you leave a comment down below with that information, you subscribe here to the Fantasy Headliners, and this video gets 1.5 thousand likes. Don't forget to hit that like button. I'm going to pick somebody that gives that information in the comments a free draft guide. So make sure you leave that information down below. Make sure you subscribe if you're new here to the Fantasy Headliners. Make sure you hit the like button. I'm going to get out of here, though. All of you stay safe and stay healthy, and I will catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.
Analytics off the chain, all the channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. Y'all stuck on third down. Your content's plain Jane. Headliners on top now. We gonna move and change. Podcast off the rip. Draft guide, so legit. Fantasy world, our game tight. You know we about that chub life. Stuck in a rut and you need some motivation. Head to the channel for this Headliner Nation. I'm a headliner.